All right. How's everyone doing? Welcome to another episode of The Inner Game of Smash. This is episode 21. My name's Tian, and I'm here joined by three of my best friends in the world. I'm here with Theo, or Squibble.
Hello.
Joining us as well as Howard, Mr.
Hello.
Tuesday, and the real ZoSo, Papa Dave.
I object to being characterized as your friends, but otherwise, hi.
The New England Patriarch says hello. We're
Alright.
joined
Yeah.
today by a super special guest, the bearded Broseph Makari.
What's good? The
Bearded
bearded
Broseph.
broseph. I like that.
That's
Mr.
good.
Fister himself.
Mr. Fister.
Oh, did you,
Yo.
you miss that one?
Hit me up with all your fisting requests, but that's for later.
So-
For after the cast, guys.
For those who don't know, Makari is very strong up-and-coming Marthman with really good local results. He's a player from the Boston area. He's also known as one of the most outgoing transporters for the area. If you let Pete know that you need to make it to a tournament that he's going to, he will go out of his way to help you out. Truly a hero for the community. So I was not surprised at all when that so many people had helped out for the car fund.
Super shout outs once again to everybody that donated. You guys are awesome. Everyone was wicked supportive when that happened to me. So yeah, I mean, I love everyone I've met, and it's been a pleasure driving people around.
Yeah, that's what part of what being a community is all about, really. For the good times that everyone spends together, those are awesome. But when the going gets tough, people will still have your back. Yeah. So with regards to peeping on the show, I guess one thing that we are interested in talking about is this idea of up and comers and how good everyone's been getting recently, and just how the pool of players expected to top 8 a new game plus is just, that pool has expanded so much over the last year. Now when you see Makari getting results like 5th or 7th on a new game plus, it doesn't really seem surprising anymore. And with so many strong players emerging into the scene, the idea about is there even really a sense of an old guard anymore? Are there just how favored are the best players at the moment? It's hard to say. What do you guys think?
So Pete, you started playing around when the big boom came, right? Like the post-documentary boom. You started playing around the same time as me and Theo, and I'm sure a ton of our viewers. But I know that you've been a Marth main forever, but you had kind of a slow period where you were experimenting with other characters, and then you came out very recently in the last couple months with a huge bang and really challenging some of the old favorites and taking sets off of them. So what do you think? Do you think that the scene but even despite that, the old favorites have remained the tournament winners forever, right? Since you expect to see Matt and Mafia and Crush at the grand finals of every.
Did you say Mott?
Mott and Mafia?
Let the man speak. Let the man speak.
But you were in one of the grand finals recently, weren't you?
I was in grand finals of New Game Plus, whatever number it was. It was right after. It was the first New Game Plus after Genesis 3. It was myself against Infinite Numbers. Third place was, I believe, Heart and Array. Fourth place was Mr. Lemon. Basically, I made a pretty good losers run. I made it up to grand finals, but honestly, I think my third place last week might have been better than that second place. Basically, just because of the win over Mafia. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, 2016. Let me. This is one way for me to put it. I've made more money off of Melee in 2016 than I did the entire year of 2015, and it's only been
make money off Melee.
It's been 2 months so far. So I mean, I think I've definitely been. I'm happy with my performances this year, for sure.
Yeah, things are definitely looking up. But so do you think that the new guard are starting to catch up to and maybe even overtake the old guard, so to speak? As one of the premier players from the new era, what are your thoughts on that?
I would say yes, but we need to keep in mind the multiple interpretations of the word overtake. We also need to keep in mind how what exactly make someone old guard versus new guard. But basically, here's my thoughts on this. Players like myself, like you, Howard, like Squibble, guys that we're relatively new in the grand scheme of things compared to some other players, but we've been at it for a while now, and we've been hungry for a while now. And if you give a hungry, able-bodied individual a year and a half to grind and study and practice and learn, and not only those things, but actually get multiple shots at a local favorite, let's say, like for example, Mafia. I have had a lot of opportunities to beat Mafia, but I have only beaten him once. And I think getting to play against someone more and more times as you keep, growing as a player, it only helps you. So basically, I think kind of what I'm saying is some of the best players around here, like let's say Mafia and Matt again and Crush, they're at a really high level compared to most of the local talent. But when you keep playing for a while, I feel like I don't know, it kind of comes in waves how much you improve, or there might even be periods of like a potential decline. And I guess what I'm saying is when you've been playing for like 6 years, 7 years, like you've gotten pretty good, but you're not going to keep getting better as fast as some people that might be newer. They're going to make bigger leaps to potentially like catch up, and they might not surpass or overtake those more old school players, but they'll get to a point where they can take sets off them. But I wouldn't say that they're like the favorite in a head-to-head matchup. But I think that's what we're seeing, especially right now, because I remember there was a hog that I drove some people down to, and I remember Howard, we didn't know that the set was best of 5, so there was some confusion, but I thought it was awesome when it seemed that you took a set off of Swift. So, like, I think of that. I think of Claps and his success against some of the players that have been playing a lot for a long time. I think of, myself being able to take a win off Mafia, being able to I actually beat Matt.Zeb in like a set where he was actually trying. It was losers. he was playing Falco the whole time. Like, and I think things like that, we're at a point now where we've been playing long enough and we've put in enough time where we can take sets off of some of those guys. But to say we've overtaken them, I think we can't say that until we are like regularly like winning the tournaments. And by we, I mean like the new guard, let's say, whether it's Squibble, Mr. Tuesday, BVB, myself, Claps, Infinite Numbers. Like Infinite Numbers has been winning many tournaments recently, but if Mafia is there, he usually doesn't win, If Matt is there, I think Matt has been beating him. I don't know how many times they've played recently, but I know Matt has gotten the better of him. I guess, I don't know. I wouldn't say we've overtaken the quote-unquote old guard yet, but I will say that it's closer to that than it has ever been, for sure. And we are really, really testing them and really pushing them to their limits in terms of making sure they practice on a regular basis, making sure they're studying their sets against us so that, they stay ahead of us. Because as people that have been behind, people that have just constantly been taking our money, winning sets, like we want to beat them. We're tired of losing to them. So we do what we have to do to beat them. And from their side, I'm sure that players like Mafia and, Matt, they don't want to lose to us because they know they've been playing longer and they know that they have more experience under their belt. So I'm sure they're taking measures to stay ahead of us. And it's kind of, I don't know, it's a cool dynamic that's going on right now because Mafia told me several times, like, Pete, you will never beat me in tournament. I'll never lose to any of you. And he was referring
That sounds like some shit that James would say.
He was referring to me, BVB, Metal Wings, like basically like the whole HTC crew. He said that none of us would ever beat him. So like, Mafia, have fun holding that. I did beat you. Sure, it wasn't winners and you knocked me out in losers, but like, I know that, and he even told me after the tournament that he wishes he could erase that set from history. But like,
It's a good thing he can't.
That strikes me as an incredibly stupid thing to say, but let's move on. I
Yeah,
don't want to harp on
but-
that too much, but that strikes me as a really dumb thing to say.
Mafia is we could do an entire episode on like his personality and his antics and his shenanigans, but yeah, we're like, you know, with where things are at like right now, he is definitely one of the old guard that we've been referencing, and I think that we're getting there in terms of the new school overtaking the old school. We're getting there, but I wouldn't say we're quite there yet. So
Yeah,
I think that's all I have to say about that.
I think I agree with that assessment on the whole, because it's one thing to say that your skill is like entering this range where you're giving like strong players a serious run for their money, and that you're forcing them to play at their hardest. But to say that you've overcome someone sort of like that has like such a different connotation, it takes a lot of time and work to like seriously actually overcome a player to the point where you'll win like 90% of the matches against them or more. That's pretty hard to accomplish. And I think sometimes like with how hungry the region is, I do think that oftentimes they're a little too results oriented. Like sometimes like if we drop like a set or if we just have a bad tournament day, just due to like one reason or another, I feel like we're pretty easy to like jump on that and just say that this player is slipping, he's getting to be pretty bad. Or conversely, if someone has like a pretty lucky day where they manage to like get like a great tournament one, what we're like a lot more likely to say that oh wow, this guy's like exploding in skill. The way I generally see skill and like perceived skill is that like everyone goes into a tournament with like sort of like more or less like a set skill range, where based on how they're playing for the day and like just due to intrinsic factors like the variance of their characters and like their emotional variance, like you'll play within a range, and you might have like a high ceiling, you might have like a low floor, some combination of those like ranges, but ultimately how whether or not you beat someone is sort of like a product of it definitely depends on like how well you did on that particular day versus how well they did. So if you happen to be able to be capable of beating someone on one of their worst days, then like there is merit in the win, but it's definitely not enough to say that you've overtaken them or anything like that. So I do think that it's great that so many players are like forcing like the quote unquote like old guard to like stop playing passively, because that's what you really want to like get out of a player. Just you want them to like play you at their absolute best when they're thinking actively and when they're giving you everything they have to offer pretty much. That's when you see really good melee. But at the same time, like over just like saying that you're better than someone over like the course of like one or two matches or one or two sets, I think it's a bit like of an aggressive assumption.
I don't hear too many people doing that, and I would say I don't think it's fair to say that New England as a region is too results focused. I think there are a few specific people who are results focused, and like I think the temptation sometimes is if you beat somebody who you consider like a peer of yours, then there's kind of the temptation to be like, oh, this is what should happen. And like I think we've all heard people do that. We've probably all done that to some extent.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, in general, I don't think as a region we're too results focused. But yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with Tian. Like, the truth is, within like a reasonable range, like there's a lot of people in New England who I could see myself dropping sets to, like a lot of them. And I mean, it's happened more than a few times recently. But I mean, people get upset. It happens. But I think, first of all, how do you decide if a player is better than another? Like, what are what's like the rigid criteria that you use to determine that? And also, like, do we have enough data, to really make a clear call in all of those cases?
Well, I don't know if being results oriented is necessarily the worst attitude to have, right? Because that's a very
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah, that's like
That's
a
not what I'm
very
saying.
concrete.
Am I in the
reward.
minority here? I've been talking on the show a lot about how I think being results oriented is generally not a good thing.
I think I side with Tien on this. I think it should be, I don't know, you should worry more about learning and taking something away from every tournament, every session, every Smash Fest, every like everything. If
Okay,
you're
I'm sorry, I misunderstood what we were talking about. That is a result, like learning and taking away from something. Okay, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I think it's bad to be too attached to individual tournament wins, but yeah.
And
So
I was
I'm
disagreeing with that.
yeah. I'd like to hear Theo's part of the side of this argument.
Yeah, because a tournament win is a very specific thing you can look at, right? Because you don't really know when your neutral game's gotten better. You can believe it's gotten better, and your punish game is pretty easy to tell if you got better because you hit something or you don't. But when you actually beat someone, that's like a very critical event, and that changes everything, right? Like Pete was this guy who was pretty good. He beats Mafia one time. Now he's like pretty good. Like,
The Marth God of New England.
You add more pretties in front. That's how you
yeah.
determine.
Well, I
who
didn't
puts
want to
someone
say super good. I don't think he's super good yet, but you're not just pretty good. It's somewhere in between.
oh, why? Thank you, Theo.
in. That's such a
I would
good- that's
even
such a
go
good
so far.
compliment.
I would even go so far as to call Pete mad good,
Not good.
Oh
isn't that
shit!
like a
quite
club?
good.
Okay.
rather good.
Is he hella good yet though?
I'm all right. I'm not even good, guys. Chill.
That's a good attitude, I think, though, to never get too complacent with your skill as well.
So I'm gonna chime in, agreeing with Theo on this point. So I've played a lot of poker in my life, and that's where I first heard the term results oriented, and it made a lot of sense in that context, right? Let's say you go all in with pocket aces and you lose, right? Whatever. You like all in pre-flop. It's like you lost the set. Don't tilt. Don't be results oriented. Don't be angry at this guy because he won with a worse hand. You just have to deal with it and move on. But Melee isn't poker. The better player in Melee wins like most of the time. I'm not going to say all of the time, but like seriously way more than almost any other game. Like even in other competitive video games where you expect there to be a lot of luck. Like I think our favorite example is Street Fighter. Lupe Fiasco beat Daigo. Stuff happens, right? But in Melee, I don't care how good you are at rapping, you're not going to beat Mango. Right? It's just not going to happen. There's so little variance in Melee results that taking a win from someone, even if it might not be their best day, like someone, your floor in Melee is pretty high. Like even if you think you're playing terribly, you might be playing terribly relative to yourself. But the range in Melee between you on your best day and you on your worst day, unless your name is Matt.Zeb, is not that large. Like
It really depends on the player.
Yeah, it does depend on the player, but for the most part, I think that beating a player, especially when you know they're trying, right? Like you can tell when you're playing them whether or not they're giving their all. And if they're giving their all, even if it's not their quote unquote best day, and you beat them, I think that means a lot, and I think that should definitely be a milestone that you set. And I think that's a good way. This is segueing into our next topic. I think that's a good way to set benchmarks of improvement, right? Because everyone always has a player that's a little better than them. There's enough players in the world that, and you're not Armada, so there's always going to be someone that's a little better than you, and you can always set that goal. I want the next time we play, I want to make sure that I beat this person in tournament. And I think that's a good way of marking your progress. But I think TN
I don't know. Like I feel like I used to think that way to the point where, you know, I had like a slight reputation for having had like quote unquote like a death note or like otherwise like a hit list of people I wanted to beat really badly. But over time, like the appeal of that just started to like really fade because it wasn't really about like which people you were like in fighting with. It was just becoming like the best player you possibly could. And that to me isn't really defined by like who exactly you're capable of beating in terms of like your rivals or the people like in your region, but really just like how far you can push the game personally and the kind of things you're capable of doing. So that to me, like, I guess like sort of like the fantasy of like stacking up against other people it's become a little like less interesting to me over time. And I've just like shifted more towards like the pursuit of like genuinely good Melee. So no matter who like I really like win or lose against, like I'm more willing to put like an asterisk next to it and accept everything with more of a grain of salt.
I think that's good. Sorry,
I would
go
like
ahead.
to say that so Howard, you were saying benchmarks, like getting a win on a person that you want to beat. I think that definitely a good thing. Like, for example, last night I beat Claps for the first time ever. I had never beaten Claps before last night, but
Yeah, congrats on that, dude.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
That's he's been a bar for me for life, so I know what that feels like. That's super congrats, man.
I appreciate it. But and also, it was the first time I played him in a while, and I don't think it was a great day for him. Partly because he was sick, for one thing. Like, every time I see that guy, I dap him up. I say what's good, but he didn't reach out his hand because he told me he's sick. And then we sat and we played, and like, frankly, I'm not quite sure exactly how I beat him, but I didn't, like, obviously I wanted to beat him, but like, I guess what I'm getting at is, if you worry too much about like results, or like the win or loss against X player, then the win feels good, but does the loss feel worse than it otherwise would? And it inhibit your longer term growth. I don't
agree.
I don't know. I have no idea, but if potentially, like, someone is focusing more on, and I think I'm getting this kind of vibe from what Tien was saying, if someone is just kind of playing Melee, they're practicing, they're thinking about what they like about the game, what they want out of the game, what they want to do with their character, what kind of like legacy they want to leave behind and stuff. And if they're just trying to blaze a trail, and they're not necessarily worrying about like X player from their region or Y player from their region, then maybe they will beat that player simply from working hard, I guess, on their own, and trying to detect the holes they have in their play and in their matchups. Like, I don't know. I'm kind of just thinking out loud. But is there a possibility that if you like think too hard about beating that person, that maybe you're kind of making it harder for yourself? I don't know.
That's what I think.
I just wanted to say that.
So let me. This is just an example I just thought of, and this is a really extreme example. But like, let me put it this way: let's say within the next week, before the next New Game Plus, every single person who's going to be at that tournament picks up Peach, and like numbers goes 2-0. Like, for example, like, everybody's like, man, I don't want to lose to infinite numbers again. Like, fuck that kid. I'm just going to pick up Peach and like learn just enough about the matchup to win against like a pretty good Ice Climbers. Like, who?
RL would be so mad.
Yeah, he would be.
It's
But like,
not as easy as it
who
looks.
is? I guess my question is like, people are learning things from that, but what's really like the payoff? Like, is that worth it for anybody? Like, numbers clearly is going to have to get a lot better against Peach, but like, I don't know. I guess that was just kind of the example I thought of. Like, I think
It's
if
not
you're
a bad example.
if you're too attached to like a specific win, okay. So here's another thing that I talk about with people a lot: going further in a tournament. Like, you can't really understate the value of that, I think. But that's kind of something you have to weigh for yourself. You know, like, is it worth it? Like, is it worth it for me to counterpick and win this set so I could maybe play a better player next round? So, I mean, I think both matter, but like, I think the work and the idea in general is more important than the result if you're trying to be like not just a locally good player, but like a nationally good player.
Yeah.
Because like, if you're talking about being a nationally good player, then like, realistically, what happens at a New Game Plus doesn't really matter all that much.
I agree.
So
So
I
that was
think
sort of like the point that I wanted to. Sorry, Theo, you can go.
That was
Howard
me.
can go.
But so I think that both of you guys in particular, of all the players I know, are like treat Melee as sort of like art, and I don't know the best way to describe this. I'm
Who are you
gonna try and
talking
do this
about?
justice, but I think Tien and ZoSo in particular, they have this. I think you guys have this idea of like playing Melee in a way that you don't have to just play to your opponent. You can play Melee at like elevate your play and just be so good that you can beat players that you that used to be better than you just by elevating it like that. And
I don't see it that way, but go on.
but like, the way I view Melee and the way that I've always gotten my wins is I think about the players that I just played, and I think about what they did to beat me, and I think about how to beat that. And in a way, it's very personal that anytime that I get beaten by someone, I'm always thinking of what can I do to better myself when I play this kind of situation the next time. Because I don't believe in my ability to beat every situation that I haven't seen just like on the spot. I can only deal with the situations that I can expect or like can theory craft in my head. I don't expect to be able to beat everything. And so if I'm preparing for beating a certain set of situations and I know that a certain player will bring me those situations, and the next time I play them, when one time I got blocked, the next time I'm able to overcome them, I think that's the way that I improve personally. And I think that's I think that it's had success for me to an extent. And I think that's there's merit in that, and that can only be done by setting benchmarks, putting players as like bars, and saying, I want to beat this player next time. I want to show that the things that I've practiced and the things that I've thought about are things that I can beat next time.
Can I go back really briefly to that to some of the ideas we were talking about before about like beating people in your region and like some of the analogies we discussed with members and teach. So like the example I had thought in my head about was what matters more, being able to beat Matt.Zeb consistently on like a regional or local level, or does it matter more to be able to be better against Falco on the whole? And that's certainly actually a worthwhile thing to think about, because and it's not actually that simple of a thing to reason out. Because if you care about like winning on a local level and getting recognition and like circuit points and whatnot, it certainly makes more sense to like just target your practice towards beating Matt.Zeb, right? He's going to be like a pretty consistent gatekeeper. He's always going to be a challenge, right? And he makes you work for your wins against him.
When he shows up.
Yeah. So does it matter more to like just develop like positional plays against him and like really know things that work against him, know high value plays to attempt against him and things like that? Or is it better to like try to understand Falco from like the point of view like of what is this character capable of, what are his limitations, what are broadly applicable things that will allow me to be better against all Falcos, even by a little bit? Or should I just like target my energy and my practice towards beating like one particular demon or one particular hard player in my region?
So
what do you guys think?
I disagree with that. Well, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I think the best way to learn a matchup is to practice specifically to beat one person, because then you focus on all their specific habits and you learn a ton of very specific tech. When you watch, like, I don't know, you could watch Armada play pools matches against a ton of different bad Falcos, which is a really good way to learn basic strats, but you're not going to learn the very specific neutral game mix-ups. So when you study to beat Matt, okay, Matt is special because you'll learn tons of jank things, but okay, say you study really hard to beat Tien. You'll learn very hard counters for everything you do, and you do a lot of good things, so other good sheiks will do them. But since you've studied it so hard, you're now aware of you're aware of like what most of Sheik's options are, so when a different Sheik does something slightly different, since you prepared so hard for Tien, at first you might get caught off guard, but now you know all these tools, so you'll be able to adapt and use what you've learned in that study. And it's a great motivator too, right? Because you want to beat this guy because they keep beating you, and that's a lot easier to motivate yourself for, at least for me, than some like inner sense of improvement, which is probably healthier and better, but that's hard.
I think you're right. Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, I was just just a second. I want to again express that I really disagree with the thing Howard said about. I'm not sure I'm understanding the way you're phrasing it, but about like that my goal is to like elevate my play to the point where I can beat anybody regardless of like the player. I'm sure. I'm like, maybe you need to explain what you mean by that. But I think, Theo, I agree with what you're saying to an extent, but I would look at it more like you are practicing against a specific player, but it's like familiarizing yourself with new situations increases like your breadth as a player, and you're comfortable with more situations, so you're able to more quickly call them if you need them. But like, I think, to me, it seems like having experience, like, and you know, like having a lot of variety in the player pool that you play against, like that to me just clearly seems way better, because then you get experience and you get practice against all these different possible things that maybe you would never have to think about if you just like learn to play against Matt.Zeb, for example. You know, I mean, I guess that's the way I look at it. But I think like, so the player that you're playing against always matters. I want to really emphasize that. And like, you know, I think it goes to show if you talk to Dr. Peepee, he'll tell you that every single person he plays in tournament, he tries as hard as he can to take them seriously and actually focus on what they're doing. Even though he could like shut off his brain and probably just tech skill at them, and he would force stock most of the people in his pool.
Yeah.
But I know in his case, he feels like he needs to give every opponent a little bit of respect because otherwise he gets like mentally lazy.
So I'm gonna chime in with something that with a little something for that. Like you're never playing against the abstract concept of Falco, right? Like you're never dealing with every single
of course.
Falco mix-up.
I agree.
Yeah, and sometimes I think that it's easy to get into the trap of playing that way if you're playing on autopilot, if you're not playing the player, if you're not trying to beat their set of habits. And while Tian, earlier you kind of said you can learn how to beat this player's set of habits, but that might not be good in the long run. I challenge that notion. I think that being able to read someone, even if it's someone you play all the time, and be able to beat their set of habits is exactly what you want. Because if they're good, then those habits will be good, and you'll see those habits in other people, like Theo said. And also that you'll be able to kind of understand why they do those things and be able to maybe extrapolate why other people do similar things.
Yeah, but you don't need to play a specific person over and over to do that.
Can I chime in?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you have the floor.
Yeah, go for it.
So Howard, you said you're never playing against abstract concept of Falco, but I feel like the whole Falco Master joke, like isn't that Falco Master? Isn't that what we're talking about? Just like just some Falco with all the Falco tech. All right. So, and what I'm getting at is to answer Tien's question. It depends on the player and what they are trying to do with Melee. For someone that is like maybe in high school or something, or like they can't really travel, or someone who doesn't really care that much, they have fun with it, but they're not trying to be the best, then maybe for them around here, it matters more to be able to beat Matt. But I can tell you for sure, for me, it matters more to be able to play very well against all different types of Falcos, whatever cloth they're cut from, like whether they are Zanguzen shooting mad lasers at me, or if it's like something completely different. And a part of why I say this is because I beat Matt's Falco the last time I played him. Granted, it was a while ago, and I went to the Big House 5, and I got knocked out by Lance in the Pants, a pretty good Falco player from the Midwest.
Illinois.
So, basically, I can tell you, for me, it's more important to me to be able to combat high-level Falco play than it is to be able to combat Matt.Zeb. And I think that,
even like medium level Falco play, because like
yeah,
Matt is,
yeah,
he's
exactly
kind of an exception to a lot of rules about Falco. Like let's
Right.
be honest.
Right, that's why I brought Matt.Zeb up as a bit of an example, because his style is very, very it's very interesting and unique, I would say. So I just brought up Matt because in the sense that is it worth it to learn cheese strategies against Matt.Zeb, or should you just process the matchup the way you would against most Falcos? And what are the long and short term gains of doing that or not doing that?
I want to add though that being able to pick up on X players' habits, I think is good for a player, because that means you're going to be quicker at picking up on a stranger's habits in the future. So that kind of stuff, it will help you learn matchups. I think Squibble was saying, by playing against this person, I am learning the matchup because I can't remember exactly how you phrased it, Theo, but what am I saying now?
You just learn.
I don't know. Basically,
people do those things.
All I'm trying to say is that in my opinion, going back to Tien's question that he threw out, I think it's more important to be able to play against Falco than it is to be able to play against Matt is just an example, but more important to play against Falco than it is to be able to play against Matt.Zeb, if that makes sense.
So I'm going to use Matt, since we're all using Matt as an example. I'm going to use Matt as my personal.
Matt.
Yeah. So personal anecdote. I started like the first time I ever played Matt, long time ago. I got completely overrun aggro falcoed, right? As most people, the first time they play their Matt get overrun. And then the next time I played another aggro falco in bracket that wasn't Matt, I was able to see the things that they did faster. And like Matt's an interesting example because he does so much weird crap. But like in my head, I was able to parse those situations and and get to the point where by focusing on my videos with him, I was able to see them in other Falcos that were also aggressive. And while they might have done the same shenanigans that he did, I was able to understand when and where those situations were good because Matt has good offense. And I think that while it is definitely possible to tunnel too hard on one person, I think that this is the risk that ZoSo was talking about earlier, that it's definitely dangerous to tunnel too hard. But by kind of nitpicking and seeing like picking out all the situations from everything in your set with a particular player, I think you can kind of see the thought process that makes sense for a character, and that's easy to kind of blow up as into the big picture and for every time you face that character.
No, I strongly disagree with that. And I thought, like, does anybody look at Matt's play and think, yeah, his thought process makes perfect sense to me? I totally can. I'm totally able to extrapolate
I get
this.
that sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what Howard is saying.
People give credit.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what Howard is saying. I think what Howard is saying is, like, not that he necessarily can see what was going on in Matt's head, but he can watch a set against Matt and then compare that sort of footage to playing against another Falco. And by having played against Matt, playing against the other Falco kind of makes a little more sense. And it's not that you understand what's going through their head or that it makes sense, because a lot of the stuff Matt does doesn't make sense. But it does give you insight into like exactly how you should approach dealing with certain things that they might do. So I think I see what you're saying, Howard. And I think we all understand that by playing against a person that plays a character, we can get better at that matchup because they are showing us or teaching us things about the matchup that we may not have known. But like, I don't know. I guess it's a question of if you tunnel vision too hard, I guess, like you were saying.
I think I do, like, I can sort of understand Matt's style, like, not all the time, but I see him as, like, a very, like, vortex-based player. He's aggressive, but his style is, like, one where he forces you to, like, guess what he's going to be coming in with at, like, multiple critical junctures, and if you guess wrong, you lose the stock, and if if you guess right, then oftentimes, like, the reward is just being able to escape and just reset the situation, hopefully. So I can kind of get it, but, like, the point is, like, by playing Matt and just really, I guess, like, taking advantage of his, like, individual player weaknesses, does that make you, like, all that much better against the character? Like,
I think that makes you a better player in general. I think that's absolutely something that people should do.
Right. I think it allows you, like, an extra set of tools to, like, add to your toolbox, like, where if you're like aiming to go for, like, positional plays or cheese, like, you have sort of like a mental list of things to try on people to see if they fall for this, like, general type of play, or whether, like, they're wise to it. So
this is something that I feel very strongly about, actually, is exploiting player weaknesses. And I think that this is something that players don't do enough of sometimes, because if they feel like it's dirty, I don't know. Sometimes I see like someone doing something stupid, and like it's the other player not baiting it out. If you're playing with someone who has a particular weakness and you just punish it every time, when it comes to tournament and you play someone else and they have that particular weakness, it's like an all-you-can-eat buffet, right? So you can just go in. You're just going like, oh no, I'm just gonna destroy this guy for.
Yeah, have you seen that one tweet I put out about, like, when you fight a Captain Falcon who doesn't know how to smash DI out of down throw?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just like this creepy old man slurping.
I think, yeah, I did enjoy that tweet, but I think that kind of like, it's important to recognize the fact that if you're going like deep into bracket at a national, you're going to be facing players who are not going to have a glaring weakness, really, for the most part. Like, but they're going to have weaknesses. They're going to have like there's going to be things that they're doing that you can turn against them, but they're not going to have a thing like, oh, I can just punish this one thing over and over and I can win. But I mean, I think everybody kind of does that to an extent. You know, like the first couple of rounds of bracket, if it's somebody who you're thinking probably isn't going to be all that great, then, I guess like the first layer of any mix-up is like, see if they do anything stupid and then beat it. And then like even amazing players, I frequently heard say that they look for one thing they can beat, and then you beat that until they change it up, basically. So yeah. I mean, I agree, but I think it's important to realize that like, if you want to be like not just a pretty good player, but a really truly exceptional player, then you're gonna have to come up against people who aren't gonna just give you shit for free.
Cool. All right. Sorry. Make your point, and then we'll move on to the next topic.
I don't know.
I mean that was basically it.
Oh no, for Pete.
Oh, sorry.
I don't think anyone's giving stuff away for free. I don't know. I guess basically what I think Howard is saying is like, I don't know. Never mind. We can go on to the next thing.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to use Matt as kind of the focal point. So Matt is 100%
Again.
a player who is a heart player, right? Like he doesn't
Like Heart
calculate
Maria?
out situations before he does them.
I think he does. I think he throws out like bad smash attacks that he knows you can't punish on purpose, and that's like a huge.
But that's just
part
a good
of his-
move, right? Like
Yeah.
he does it because he feels that way. Like I was actually playing with Matt a while ago, and at one point he started thinking. Like, and he told me that he started thinking. But even before he told me that, before the game finished, I was like, I could tell because he played really differently than his usual, Matt Dodzip style.
Mhm.
And there are some players that think a lot, right? Like you watch them and they're just like, you can see the gears churning the entire time. And who's a good? I think ZoSo, you're a good example of this. Like you're someone who's like, when I watch you dash dance, I feel like you're looking for specific things all the time. And I don't know if that's true, but that's the way it looks to me. And this is something that I think you might have a lot to say about.
Sorry, go ahead.
Is how do you play in a way that you don't get caught up in your own thoughts? Like you don't try too hard to do things, and then you, because we all know that in Melee, if you try too hard to think, you just can't do anything because Melee is too hard. Like how do you get to that point where you can both think about things and not think about them at the same time?
Wait,
Um,
let me follow up on that just a little bit. So Howard's
Sorry.
talking about
Go
like
ahead.
what we had a brief conversation about this earlier. So Howard's talking about like being a heart player where you're just like playing off of intuition and off of like what feels like the right thing to do, versus being someone who's like playing mentally and who was like thinking consciously. It's sort of like trying to differentiate the difference between like conscious play versus unconscious play. Yeah, go ahead.
So in my case, the way that I sort of this out was by like experiencing both extremes, because when I was like starting to get okay, but I had no idea what being good actually meant, and I had really no idea what I was doing. I just kind of like cobbled together a loose like patchwork of habits that sort of vaguely worked against people. And then I didn't really like that I was playing that way because I felt like I didn't get why I was beating people. And then I kind of started to try to do the opposite and try to think really, really hard about every single thing I did. And I was like, well, this isn't working either. And then I kind of like found a happy medium. But I think like, yeah, there's a lot of really thoughtful players, but everybody, I think, on some level, basically plays by instinct and like with their heart. Every single person does that, I think, to some extent. But it's like, it's not so much that you're just kind of like plucking something out of like the ether or whatever and just like, oh, I'm just going to do this because it feels like ordained, by like the alignment of the planets. It's like you see certain situations so many times, and this kind of goes into what Theo was talking about like familiarizing yourself with situations by playing specific players. You see something and you learn the counter to it, and it becomes so ingrained that it's like you don't think about the individual components of it. It just happens, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I think that's really kind of the goal, and that's the goal. I was talking about this with DizKid last night. That's really kind of the goal in music in a lot of ways. Like, it's not really that you're thinking super hard about every single note you play. It's like you have it's bridging conception and execution, basically. You know, like you hear an opportunity to do something, and you have to be able to do it without thinking like, okay, well, my finger needs to go here. What scale am I playing? Oh God. Oh, it's 3 measures have passed. Okay. See you guys next gig, I guess. You know, like, yeah. So it's, I don't know. I guess what I really want to press there is the idea of like breaking down the barriers between your head and your hands, so that things just happen when you need them, and you don't really need to overly think about it.
Hmm.
But at the same time, you need to think. So you're a big fan of the whole just do what your fingers tell you to do, and that definitely works for a lot of people. But there are some times when what you're doing and what your fingers tell you to do just isn't working for whatever reason. Maybe they have to read on you, maybe whatever, right? So and sometimes you need to think. Like I firmly believe that there's definitely
I'm not disagreeing with that.
a benefit to figuring out what's going on, why what you're doing isn't working, why this player is beating you. How do you implement that at the same time? Is it just that you're so good at doing all the things you can think macro and micro at the same time?
No, I mean, I think all the micro and like your options and your decisions, like I guess what I'm saying is, it's not that I'm saying don't think. I'm saying that your thought process has to be extremely streamlined. You know, and like people are talking past each other. Yeah, I agree with Keith a little bit. Yeah, I think like your thought process just needs to be trimmed down to the point where, like, yeah, you're going to be focusing on what your opponent is doing and thinking like, well, he might do this next time, but like you can't think through every little individual like component of that. You know, like to some extent, I guess it's kind of like, you know, your thought process becomes very like modular, and you just kind of have like this whole set of options just kind of falls into place when you need it.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way I think of it. I guess it's like it seems a little weird, but
so I hear what you're saying, but and you seem to be advocating an intuition, but to me, someone who plays by flow and intuition is something a little different. Like you're thinking of modularizing your movements so that when you tell your hands go, it does that. And I think that's what every good player needs to be a good player. And I completely agree with that. But I think there are some players that just don't think when they play. Like their head, like if you could listen to their head, it's just like static or just like I don't know, music or something. They're not thinking, I need to be more careful here. I need to be more X here. Like you wouldn't see words. And as someone who definitely thinks in words even while they play, like I'm getting beaten because I'm being too aggressive and to tone it back. I don't think we have any truly, visceral players here. I think that on this cast, like we managed to collect 5 people here who all are more, for lack of a better word, cerebral.
I don't know. I don't think I think.
Oh, you don't?
Well, I think a bit. I think the least. I think I'm getting better at it, but I feel like I think not that fast.
based on what you've told me, Theo, I think your conscious stuff is more about like, if this guy is getting annoyed by this thing I'm doing, like if you pick up on that, you're like, oh, I'm just gonna do that so he beats himself. You know?
Yeah.
And, like, that's really valuable. That's a good like talent to have.
I think hard like between stocks, but during the stock, I usually just because you can't think. It's way too fast. It's like music. You have to play.
That's definitely my ideal. So I guess I have a bit of a reputation, like according to Howard, for thinking a lot or playing that way. But honestly, my ideal is to leave the thinking to the space between matches, and also to leave thinking at home. Like there's going to be a lot of time to process matches after the fact, but when you're actually just like in the moment, in the heat of the moment, trying to play, the more you actually tell yourself to like space a specific way or to like do this recovery mix-up or whatnot, do this one tricky thing, the more I think it impedes your ability to actually play. So this is going back to like something from the game of tennis, but like the more you actually think about your stroke, the worse your stroke tends to be. So it's good to like think big picture and say like what's working, what's not, what are the things that you need to like work on, especially between stocks or between games. That, you know, nothing's really impeding your thought process then. When you're just playing the game, do like, you know, don't play foolishly to the point where like you're running headlong in the opponent's traps. But if something feels like it's the right thing to do, then the less hesitation you have, oftentimes more like the faster you can respond. Pete, did you have any ideas about this? Like, did I was
Yeah,
hoping you would
no,
chime in.
yeah, I was gonna piggyback off of that actually, because I think that we get better at playing with our brain by thorough preparation. The whole brain side of it, I think,
Yes.
comes to play when we study our sets, when we are at home trying to like practice tech wall jump back air stuff, like as a Marth player, like the thoughts I think are important in your preparation, and then when you're actually in the set, I think you need to have put in the mental energy to be at the point where you can think, but you're not thinking about thinking. You're just playing. But the thoughts happen because you've prepared and because you have already thought about all the different kind of stuff. And like I think I play more with my heart, honestly, than my head. Like, even though I've been just credited, if that's even the right word. I don't know if it's something that someone would take credit for. But anyway, you said everyone here is cerebral, for lack of a better term. Like, and I think that I might be, but I think at the same time, like, I'll just do like the stupidest, what's it called? Ledge. Why can't I talk? The shield breaker
Watch out,
stall.
neutral B.
Yeah, I'll do like the dumbest shield breaker stall, or I'll do the dumbest like waveland on up tilt or something like that. And like, there's times where I kind of just like body myself just because there's like a certain way that I play the game, and I think I could afford to play a little more mentally. But my overall thoughts on this topic are that people need, like, it is imperative to put in the kind of mental energy into your practice, into your preparation, because that's how it'll really come to fruition when you're in a set and you need to beat this person in tournament, or else you're knocked out and now you get to watch the rest of the tournament. Like, it's kind of like how marathon runners have to be training, like, you know, for months leading up to the marathon. They can't just like wake up the morning of and just like go jog around a track and then they're good. And
Right.
I think like the mental side of it is kind of like that. But I think what Dave said at the beginning of this, how every single player plays with their heart, I think that is also true. And it's the varying degrees with which that people play with their heads that changes. And I think it's definitely a good thing to be using your brain. Like, I think if you're not going to go that far. But it's how and when you use your brain that's important. Because like what Tien was saying, I think I agree with Tien about how, like, when you're actually, like, you know, there in the set, like, trying to think about it might kind of, I don't know, inhibit you, or it might kind of like hold you back. Just like how he said, you know, if you're thinking about your tennis swing too much, like, the more you think about it, the worse it might get. So I think that, like, thinking is important. This is definitely a thinking man's game, and I think that it's something that we all need to do is use our heads, but you gotta use it at the right time, I guess. And I think when you're actually like in a set, you don't want to be thinking too much. Like, we've all heard about the flow state.
I'm going to interrupt
shut
you
up.
for a quick moment to say that this will be our last topic, and after this, we're going to be taking viewer questions. So toss them into Twitch chat now. Anyways, Pete, continue, please.
So
Flow state.
Flow state. When Gravy's girlfriend Alyssa, also known as Biscuits, was up in Boston. Shout outs to Alyssa. She's an awesome person, but she's done she's done some research and like writing on what is called the flow state. And I think that like this whole topic can be boiled down to like how do I play every second of all my sets in the flow state? Because that, by the sound of it, now I haven't done a lot of research myself. By the sound of it, if you can play every second of all your sets in the flow state, then you are, leagues beyond a lot of other players, and you're playing like literally the best possible melee that you can be playing, as long as you're practicing. As long as you're practicing to supplement being able to play in that state. Because if you can play in the flow state, but you're like missing L cancels and stuff, obviously that's bad. But whatever it takes to get to that, I think is what people need to do. And I think it kind of, there's a different ways to go about it. Like for one thing, I think players would be benefited by meditating. I think meditation can help someone better use their head when they're in tournament. Or maybe not use their head because they're thinking too much or something. But I don't know. Flow state is important, but I don't even know, man. I think that's like most of my thoughts on this.
I mean, the thing is, it's hard to just go there. But yeah, I think that's really the ideal. Is like when, like you're thinking about your opponent. You're thinking like the next time he's in this situation, he might do this. But like your answer to that needs to just happen with like this is something that gets talked about a lot in the inner game of tennis. The whole idea of stepping out of your own way.
So one of our viewers, I think it's Jorge, I don't actually know, Mizu, the Ganon player, /Sheik, /Samus, or whatever he wants to be playing that day. If you don't know him, super cool guy. He says, what if your flow state is worse than the other guy's flow state, right? Like what if your two methods clash? And to my response to that is, then your flow state's not going to beat his, and you need to start thinking again. Like that's my idea. It's weird to say after we talked up flow and how good it is all this time. But there's something to be said that while flow is good, it's not necessarily the idea that that's the best you can possibly be playing. Because sometimes thinking helps, right? Like I know that all of us have discrete thoughts when we play, right? Like it's not just all white noise of punish here, be here, space here. Sometimes you're like, he tech rolled that way last time. I think he's this kind of player, so I think he's gonna either tech roll the same way or not, right? Like based on who they are, and you kind of have that discrete thought at times. I know I do. I don't know if this is true for everyone else, or like picking up on patterns like, of course you do that, and like even if you don't think wave dash shine back where did this complex input, you're thinking, of course you do that, whatever that is. And I think that flow is good, but that doesn't mean like you're not thinking at all necessarily. And especially if it's not working, sometimes you have to pop out and reevaluate what is.
So with the idea of flow state, to answer Jorge's question a little bit, if you sense that somebody's flow state is better than yours, I feel like you're already thinking too much about like in a self-critical kind of way. Honestly, the way you want to play is just to think, what is my opponent doing? What am I doing? And just don't even beat down on yourself or like to assume that other people are just like beating you. Just take yourself out of like self-evaluation in the sense that, I just wouldn't be negative. I would just think, like, what are the tweaks that need to be made rather than like, I'm losing all these interactions in a row. I have to change something drastic or else I lose. Sometimes that's the right thing to think, but a lot of the time, like, it's just good to be confident. And honestly, Melee is a game where you can afford to take like breaks within a match. And what I mean by that is like you can buy yourself time to think with a lot of characters. If you're playing characters that are good at running away, like you can make advantage of that time to like form a better game plan. If you're playing a character with like good ledge stalls, you can like just take a few seconds to think and like reflect on what's going on and then re-enter the match. Honestly, the time you spend like just being invincible, hovering on the platform, that's an excellent resource that like not enough people take advantage of. Use that time to think. But once you're actually just playing against them, regardless of their flow, your goal, you can try to disrupt their flow or to try to do your best to match your flow with theirs. But it's something you have to figure out like really quickly, but hopefully not in a way that involves like conscious awareness of your ego.
All right.
The
Well,
whole concept of one person's flow state being better than another person's flow state is interesting to me because I don't even really like that doesn't sound possible. Kind of, it sounds to me like that person maybe their neutral is just not good, or maybe they're just not as good of a melee player. But like I don't think it's ever a bad thing to be in the flow state. And on top of that, like in my interpretation of the flow state, there are thoughts like oh, that person tech rolled to the left. But it's not like you tell yourself, like the voice in your head isn't saying. It's just you just know, and it's like that is a part of the flow state. The way I interpret it, anyway. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and as much as we emphasize the flow state, I think it's definitely possible to craft wins if you have enough experience. If you have like a strong enough understanding of like what the flow charts are or what the game plan can be, all you really need to do is like win neutral once or twice or do like very specific outplays to get the punish game started. So it's not always about like ambiguity and mix-ups. Like there are a lot of like rigid rules about melee that just you can force your opponents to follow. If you get grabbed as like a certain character, well, that severely constrains your options. And when you're off stage, the same thing applies. So.
All right. I think that's about all the time we have for our show. We saw some other good questions.
A really good question though.
Oh, you
Let's
really want
go for
to answer this question?
So
Yeah.
Chick asks, what do you think about the all Ganon crew that College of Fenway played against some other school in the Melee games? So I think it was amazing, but unfortunately they lost while trying to style. So you guys look really, really dumb.
You heard it here first, guys. College of Fenway, really, really dumb.
Yeah.
No, that's
I
hard.
really wish it would have worked out.
I was gonna add something to the thing we were just talking about, but if we don't have time, then
You can make that our closing remark, and then we'll do shoutouts real quick after that.
I think, like, how to put this? Basically, like, this is something that a lot of people in the community do. I don't want to speak too broadly, but a really good example of this is people talk about playing the player versus playing the character.
Mhm.
And I think basically the way I see it is that you're really always doing both. And the things that you notice about the player are going to manifest differently depending on the character they play. But I think like when I say flowing, I'm going to echo what Pete said. When I'm talking about like flowing or like playing by instinct or playing by intuition, I'm not saying at all that you're not thinking. And like, I think it's dangerous to make like kind of a false dichotomy between like either you're playing by heart or you're completely thinking everything through. And I'm not saying that. I just think, kind of going back to what I said a while ago, everybody really is always doing both to some extent.
Mhm.
But like, I think if you're like doing a lot of things by intuition and by instinct, then you're not using as much cognitive energy on that. So you can use that to focus on like the stuff that you can't practice in your bedroom, like you can use that to observe things about your opponent. That's just kind of the way I see it. But yeah, I wanted to weigh in on that one.
All right. Well, thank you. And so let's go to shoutouts. I know that I feel very confident for some reason, Pete, that you will have shoutouts. So would you like to start?
Oh, I always got shout-outs, baby. You know that. I'll shout out BVB. BVB beat me last night for the first time in a little while. At times, he doesn't seem like the hungriest melee player, but I can assure you he's hungry. And, he's definitely making moves. The whole HTC is making moves. Shout-outs to the HTC. Shout-outs to Bonk Cushy because he had a really good kind of comment/question about tourney nerves. I wish we could have had time to get to it, but Bonk is a great dude, awesome Pikachu, and I saw that comment in there, and maybe we can address like tourney nerves, and if that's a potential just like adrenaline rush, or maybe I shouldn't say you guys, maybe you guys can address that next week. But also shout outs to just the inner game of Smash. Like, thank you for inviting me to be on the show. It's really been a blast. So I got HTC, BVB, Bonk, and that good question. You guys, Shout outs to anyone that ever comes to our locals from out of state. So this is kind of a shout out to ZoSo and Diz Kid from last night.
Yeah.
It always
Shout outs to me.
it always
Anti
kind of,
shoutouts.
by the way.
Anti shoutouts.
it
I
always
just wanna-
spices things up.
I just want to repeat what I said last night. I watched BVB versus Makari at New Game Plus last night, and that was looking like BVB versus ZoSo. That shit was fucking sick.
See, like people are
The
going to
young
misinterpret
self-plug.
that. Like by saying that, ZoSo is saying that he looks like shit against BVB because he does.
Exactly.
No offense.
Exactly. That's what I was getting at as well.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Never mind.
But I'll get him next time. That's it for my shout outs. Again, thanks guys for having me on. Like this has been really fun.
All right, hard to follow that one up.
Shoutouts to both my real dad and the Smasher dad. Mostly Smasher dad for doing fun commentary with me. That new-
Oh, I
new
thought you were
kid
talking
plus.
about ZoSo when you said Smash Your Dad.
Nah.
Yeah, good old
Like
Papa
my-
Dave.
my
That's what I
Papa
thought
Dave
too.
sensei.
No, I'm his smasher nemesis.
I see.
Theo hates me deep down. I know it.
Maybe. But
Who's your smasher dad, Theo?
like
There's
the
literally
guy
a
named
person
There's a
with
guy
the
named Dad.
Dad.
Yeah, he's a Street Fighter player, does sick commentary. Super fun guy, hella good at Street Fighter. I don't know if he plays Melee, but he's super fun.
He does.
Oh, good, cool.
Street Fighter is a good game. Everybody should play it. So shout outs to Diz Kid. He's at my apartment right now. Say hi, Kyle.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, Kyle.
Shout outs to Diz Kid. He's the man. He's an excellent person and a good influence in the community. And shout outs to Slox, who's currently going to be bodying people at Xanadu, or shortly going to be bodying people
Oh,
at Xanadu.
awesome.
So
That's
everybody
great.
tune in and watch him. Retweet him if he tweets anything.
That's great. Yeah,
Let's
will
give the
do.
boys some love.
I'd like to shout out all the people who don't usually come out to tournaments that entered yesterday because of the crew battles. Always good to see you. And enter bracket and do better every time. And
I've got some shout outs as well.
Oh, yeah.
Howard.
I
yeah.
yeah.
I have shout outs for Captain Spuggers and Ryubeat, who are going to be coming up to Mass Madness this weekend.
Hell yeah.
This is actually Ryubeat's first Smash tournament out of region. So, and the two of them are teaming. Yeah, that's insane, right? Like, if you actually think about it, he's only ever entered New York and New Jersey tournaments, but this is his first out of region event, and I'm
Yeah,
sure
and that's sick. That's
yeah,
sick.
the two of them are going to be teaming. It's going to be super hype, and I would always be glad to see like New England. We love to see like out of region players coming up to see us. So definitely very excited about that. So huge shout outs to both of them. Hope you guys enjoy New England.
All right. And with that, that's our show. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Yeah, we hope to see you guys around next week.